everybody, and welcome to Room 214 Live, the show to help you grow with marketing. Today, I'm going to start with asking one simple question. What is the job that your product is hired to do? Or if you sell services, what is the service that your job is hired to do? Did I say that right?
No, that's all right. People get the point.
We get the point. Well,
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've got James Clark here, and we're talking about jobs to be done theory. So this is going to get pretty interesting quick. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be back.
Yes, thanks
Yeah.
very much. So, James, you've written about jobs to be done theory. You've presented to various audiences, and you've also been knee deep in the actual work to lead and deliver the service. There are many tenets to jobs to be done, and let's not get into the theory. I would love to hear you tell the audience what is jobs to be done. Why should they care?
In its simplest form, anytime anyone buys a product or service, they're trying to make progress towards something. So they're actually hiring, if you want to think about it, they're hiring your product or service to do a job. And that's our goal, is to find out what job is it that they're hiring it to do. So that's what we do. Is we actually, and the other interesting part of it is we get on the phone with customers. So this isn't like watching data and analytics and how people are like flowing through a particular website or what they're searching for. This is literally, we hop on the phone, we do about an hour-long interview. And what's interesting is most people don't think they'll fill up the hour when we get on the phone, and it's totally filled. I mean, we have to cut people off.
That's interesting. So, as marketers, typically we like to create personas. We want demographics, psychographics. We really want to understand who's our target audience, and that makes a lot of sense. And then typically from there, we'll create buyer's journeys, right? We want to understand from the time that a person is aware that they have a need, all the way up through consideration, purchase, and even beyond. And so those are super helpful fundamental tools to marketing. Help us understand, how is jobs to be done different than that?
Yeah, well, in one way, jobs to be done is in conflict with personas. And I like to give the example of, you see today in society, people are having children later, and also you see that a lot of times men are maybe the caretaker in the family, and the woman is the breadwinner. And a lot of marketing, I think everyone will agree to this, everyone wants to target the millennial mom. Where reality is, if you're targeting a millennial mom, there's no difference between the job that, let's say, a Gen X dad is doing raising a child versus what the job of the product that the dad is looking to buy than the millennial mom. So those two things are in conflict with each other. We still use personas just in terms of how do you target, because that's advertising. That's how the advertising models are based. You want to do demographics and persona based. But what we do and understand is the job is very different, and we can create content during those different phases that get people to think about, like, oh, they think to themselves, oh, this is me. This content makes sense to me. And it doesn't matter what demographic it is.
Gotcha. And so, and the other thing that I think we understand that's really interesting with jobs to be done is we get into this conversation of forces for change or forces against change. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what that is.
So when we hop on the phone with customers, we're very keen to begin to listen to those particular forces. And so those forces are push, pull, habit, and anxiety. So if we're talking to a customer, so a couple of key questions. We ask two questions in this. We'll ask, like, when did you buy the product? And then we walk them through, ask them to walk us through what happened that day. Were you at work? Were you at your table? Were you with someone else? Give us a run up to that. A very pretty much like documentary style, like paint the picture for us. Was it cold outside? And then the other question we ask is, when was the first time you started thinking or considering purchasing this product? And what you find is that very different than your typical marketing buyer's journey. It goes way back. It goes 2 years, 8 years, 12 years back. And what you find is there's a lot of like social considerations that are being had, emotional considerations that are being had, life stage considerations that are being had. So it's not just when they started taking action, when they put in a search term internally into Google, let's say, where it's like, oh, now this is when the buyer's journey begins. Certainly it happens in digital. But those things, like, so for push, like an example of that might be you have a new child coming and you have two kids in the current bedroom, your house is too small. I mean, you have an end date, you have a terminus, like you're being pushed into a situation. So you're thinking, like, my current situation is not going to work this current situation isn't going to work for me in the future. A pull might be something that you recognize. You might read or hear an influence or someone talk about something that well, it's like, you know what, I actually have that problem. I didn't even know there was a solution to that. And so you begin to be pulled into that. So you see a lot of early adopters will weigh more heavily, let's say, in pull.
Do you think it's fair to say that most marketing is focused on the push and the pull side of things?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that even more so on the pull, they're trying to, you get a little bit of feature sets like, oh, this is like new and whiz bang and cool. Where really like the push really begins to understand the emotional state. Like what is pushing them into it. Polling can be that idea of like solving problems, which some companies are relatively good at, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what about the opposing forces?
Yeah, it's habit and anxiety. And so one of the things that we look for is them talking about things that they aren't willing or weren't willing to give up for a number of times. So that habit could be, I loved this brand, I wasn't willing to give it up, or maybe this is like what my kids like and taste, or something like that. They just had a habit of going through this, or the product's not available at the stores that I shop in. So they had to like change some behavior in order to be able to get the product. What you're seeing with e-commerce is it's really starting to lower a lot of the particular habits in terms of shopping and buying behaviors, which is opening up new opportunities for companies to go direct to consumer. Those habits are being dropped. Anxiety comes in the form of, is this product going to do what it says it's going to do? And it's really important for us to understand, why did you not purchase sooner, for instance? How much research did you actually have to do? Like, why did it take you 3, 8, 12 years to get to this point? And so a lot of times it's in that anxiety stage where organizations can create content. So for instance, if anxiety is consistently featured within the customer feedback, a lot of things such as testimonials do really well. Third-party validation, like PR hits, do really well to help lower the anxiety. And so that's an entire matrix. If you think about it, you have push and pull kind of on the upper. We have habit anxiety on the below. And if that formula is weighted heavier below, the people potentially won't purchase the product, which is actually a big thing. They're actually not even purchasing the competition's product. So when people think about market share, a lot of times it's like they're not even buying anyone's product. And so the market share is actually much larger if you can begin to take the top part, the push and pull, and increase that. And then you take the bottom part, the habit and anxiety, and through your content decrease that. It actually opens up new markets for you.
Right. And I mean, to your point, one of the problems with anxiety is it's analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
People won't, it's like, even if there's too much to choose from.
Yeah.
So
freedom looks like too many choices.
So, okay. To help our audience understand, what does this practically look like? I mean, you've touched on a couple of the questions already, but, this is not a focus group.
Yeah.
It's not a survey. And you even mentioned, you could be on the phone for an hour with customers. And we've joked about how sometimes it's almost a counseling session.
Yeah.
People at first, you're asking these questions and they're kind of like, oh, this is weird. And they're not opening up. And then all of a sudden memory kicks in and you start with notes and all kinds of other insights. So talk a little bit about, maybe because you've already touched on the experience of the conversation, feel free to expand on that. But I'm also curious, like, what are some of the outcomes as well?
Yeah, I think that one of the more important outcomes is you begin to hear growth and innovation opportunities for the client, on the client side. And so if you think that, you're here, you're being hired to solve a particular problem or help someone make progress. So there's a job that's happening in there. But there are things that that we hear, like, for instance, they might be hacking your product with another product, or they might be using your product in a way that you didn't even intend it to be used. Those are innovation opportunities when we hear that.
So, for example, we work with a shoe company.
Right.
We found out that the shoes are not waterproof, however.
Right. So people are hacking together. They're spraying things together. They're telling us about how they've actually made them waterproof themselves. And so, yeah, this is a little bit of consistent feedback. So, there's a good innovation opportunity within their product line to do, fully waterproof. Yeah. And so when you start seeing those consistencies in that end, you might start seeing that people might have come into the product category using someone else's product first. So you might be able to say, hey, listen, we can go upstream and intercept the customer earlier by offering that product, because that product might be an entryway into ours. So the threat to that organization is if that company that's upstream actually moves into your area and into your market, then they already have the customer and the loyalty. So it's hard to break loyalty. It's hard to break habit. And so these are areas where we can say, hey, listen, you can innovate by going upstream and getting the consumer earlier in the process.
So from a real practical perspective, like how many people are you talking to when you're going through this process?
Yeah, it's not like a study. It's not like a focus group where you get 10 people in a room, or it's not like a survey where you want a couple hundred or something like that. We're in the target range of like 15 interviews, I think is like a real healthy feedback, because you begin to see the common themes when you're actually talking to individuals and they begin to explore it. So in an hour-long conversation that has no, let's say, we're not walking through particular steps, they're just opening it up and telling us all about it. There are certainly almost always consistent themes in it. So it's from a practical standpoint of thinking of a CMO or a marketing, you're thinking, okay, it's about an hour long, that's 15 hours. Within 15 hours, you're getting feedback on product innovation, growth opportunities, target markets, emotional content strategy. All of this is coming out in a matter of like 15 interviews. It really accelerates the entire process. Plus, it gives everybody an understanding of why we're creating this kind of content. What does it mean for us when we're working on it? Rather than just like, boy, what content should we create next month? It's going to be hot out. Rather than like, hey, listen, this is content that our customers need, and it moves them through that buying process a lot faster.
That's fascinating too, and I think we can close up on this thought too. There was a Steve Jobs quote up there, and that was actually related to the fact that this kind of flies in the face of just asking customers, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Jobs was never a fan of that. He was basically like, customers don't know what they want, and often even referenced Henry Ford as saying, if I would have asked customers what they want, they would have told me a faster horse.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even guys like Peter Drucker tell you it's rare that the customer is buying what the company thinks they're selling. And so it's just fascinating to know that there is a framework there, a real practice, a theory that we can get into and leverage that goes beyond personas and the buyer's journey. For those of you that are interested in knowing more about Jobs to be Done, you can actually go to the Room 214 blog, and James has written about it, and we've got presentations. You can also look into Professor Clay Christensen, who's really a leading innovator at Harvard University, at the Harvard Business School there. And he really began to uncover some things about this theory about 20 years ago. I think he wrote I want to say it was the
Competing Against Luck.
Yeah, so Competing Against Luck was his book a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
which really expands into Jobs to be Done. And about 20 years ago, he wrote The Innovator's Dilemma.
Right. Yeah.
And then 3 years later, he came back in with The Innovator's Solution. Anyway, brilliant thought leader, and a lot of great resources there. So we don't have any questions today. It's funny, we actually have our questions come over Slack, and there's a system-wide Slack outage. Woohoo!
Right. Productivity is happening today.
Productivity is happening today. So everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Remember, you can join us live every Wednesday at 11:15 a.m. Mountain Time. I will tell you, we will not be live on the 4th of July, which is next Wednesday. So keep that in mind. If you have anything that you would like to speak with me about, definitely contact me. You can actually schedule a call with me at calendly.com/Jason Cormier. If you're interested in this kind of material and would like to know more, go to our website, room214.com. You can also subscribe to our digital trends report by going to room214.com/digital-trends. So that's a wrap for this week. Thanks so much. Thank you, James.
Thanks, man.
All right. We'll see you
Pleasure.
next time, guys.